oath of office first before you guys call the meeting to order. So I first want to welcome you and congratulate you on your appointment to the Transportation Commission, and thank the city appreciates your volunteer effort to apply to advisory body. So if all of you could please stand, and I'll put the oath on the screen so you can follow along. And please raise your right hand and repeat after me when I ask you to state your name. If you could state one at a time from that side over to this side. So I, and please state your name.
I, Julie Bowman.
Michael Barnes.
Judy Kerr.
Ken McCroskey.
Sarah Zupa.
Do solemnly affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. And do you all attest to the oath that you just took?
Yes.
You may lower your hand now. Thank you. And please go ahead and sign the oath that's in front of you. And we'll make a copy and distribute it after the meeting.
And real fast, these are-
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. As we don't yet have a chair assigned, I will call the meeting to order and do the roll call and land acknowledgement. So Commissioner Baldwin.
Here.
Commissioner Barnes.
Here.
Commissioner Hiley. Commissioner Kerr.
Here.
Commissioner Javendel.
Present.
Commissioner McCroskey.
Present.
Commissioner Zuba.
Here.
All present. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lishan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. On to item 2, selection of a temporary chair. We do have an item at the end of the agenda for selecting a chair and vice chair for the year, but figured it would be easier to start smaller and take nominations for chairing this meeting. So with that, I'll open it up for nominations for chair pro tempore to run this meeting.
I'd like to nominate Michael Barnes to chair the meeting if he's willing and able.
Anybody else?
We don't need seconds for nominations if you're willing to accept that. Also open to taking other nominations before. Are you accepting of the nomination? Okay.
Just let me get my computer.
Okay.
Bring up my computer.
Are there other nominations for chair pro tempore? Not seeing any. We'll close for nominations, and we'll take a vote for Chair pro tempore for Commissioner Barnes. So, roll call vote. Commissioner Baldwin.
Aye.
Commissioner Barnes.
Aye.
Commissioner Hiley.
Aye.
Commissioner Kerr.
Aye.
Commissioner Javindal.
Aye.
Commissioner McCroskey.
Aye.
Commissioner Zupa. Motion carries. Chair Barnes, the meeting is yours.
Do you have, my computer obviously forgot where we are. Here we go.
Next item is public
Do you
comment.
have why don't you go ahead until I get this
Okay.
moved up?
We'll open it up for public comment. I'll grab you an agenda.
And we're opening the commission up to public comment for any item that is not on the agenda. So if anyone is hoping to speak on anything not on the agenda, please raise your hand in the audience or online. Seeing no hands raised.
Shall I? Since there were no hands raised, we'll move to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 4, presentation monthly police data on collisions and citations.
So we are reporting tonight on 3 months of data, November, December, and January. And give us 1 second to pull up the data. In the month of November, there were 0 pedestrian-involved collisions. In the month of December, there were 2, and in the month of January, there were 3. In terms of bike-involved collisions, there were 0 in November, 2 in December, and 0 in January. Total collisions, there were 9 in November, 16 in December, and 11 in January. Collisions with injuries, 0 in November, 9 in December, and 6 in January. Citations, there were 21 in November, 32 in December, and 45 in January. And DUI arrests, there were 3 in November, 4 in December, and 4 in January. And that is the monthly police data on collisions and citations.
Okay, here's how we usually do this. We will, the council or the commissioners can ask questions. We open it up for the public for their questions. We bring it back for any thoughtful, long comments. I'm the worst. I start making comments when I should be asking questions, so don't be like me. And then we'll wrap it up and move on. So, commissioners, any questions?
Do we know why there's such a significant decrease in moving citations between like 2016 to 2020, 2021? Is that because of number of officers on duty or other, like something with the practices of citations?
Yeah, the question has come up before. The primary answer is that there was earlier in the data period grant funding, state funding for additional enforcement that has decreased over time. The other answer is just there's been changes in citation practices over that time period as well.
Anyone else? I have a quick one. There is a spike in collisions, I believe. It went in the 3 months, 096, right? There was 9 in December. We attribute that to more pedestrian traffic due to the Christmas holiday. Was there any thought about that?
It's not something, it's not a consistent year-to-year spike that month. So we can dive into that a little more when we do annual analysis, but we do see some increase over the winter months, the darker months more generally, but not sort of a specific December spike.
It seems from the DUIs that 3, 4, 4 were a city of teetotalers because it didn't go up in December at all.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Oh, I said, pardon me. That's the other thing, folks. Try to talk into the microphone. I said, it looks like we're a city of teetotalers because there's no spike in December at all in DUIs. Okay, if there's no more questions from the commission.
I do have one further question, and that relates to, this is interesting data, but are there other data points on any of the reports that are submitted to the police department that would be useful to us to look at, or are we looking at all the available data that makes sense for our mission and what we're trying to look at? So in other words, the age, the learner permit status versus full driver's license status, those sorts of things, are they available in the police data or not?
This is the level of data we get on a monthly basis, but once the data is finalized, it gets reported to the state, what's called SWITR's program, where all collision incidents that have reports get sort of funneled into a state database, and we take a look at that generally annually, where we can dive into specific factors involved with injury collisions in particular. We have good mapping tools.
So to clarify, this is from the city, and then at an annualized basis, there is further detail available to us. Okay, got it.
Any other questions? Okay, members of the public?
Not seeing any hands.
0? Okay, so we can bring it back to commissioners.
Just on background, it was made clear to this commission sometime in the last 10, 15 years that when an officer issues a citation for a moving violation, there are all kinds of fees and takeaways from the amount of that was cited. And Albany ends up with about 17% of the revenue from the ticket. Writing tickets takes time, energy, and tracking. So I believe the APD has switched to using a greater number of warnings over tickets as a sort of a time-saving measure and a practicality.
Okay, seeing no other hands raised, let's move on to item 5, consent calendar. And consent calendar are generally items that are approved as a whole. Commissioners are allowed to pull items from the consent calendar, but we usually do them in one fell swoop. So are anyone desiring to pull any item from consent?
5.2, we had some public comment.
Okay, so let's do 5.1 and then come back to 5.2. Any problems with 5.1?
No, I'd like to move approval of 5.1, the minutes of the December 2004 commission meeting.
Second? Need a vote?
Second.
We generally
Okay.
do a roll call vote.
Let's do a vote.
Commissioner Baldwin. Commissioner Hiley.
Aye.
Commissioner Kerr.
Aye. Aye.
Commissioner Javendel.
Aye.
Commissioner McCroskey.
Yes.
Commissioner Zupa. And Chair Barnes.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, on to 5.2. Ken?
We do have a hand raised, presumably on this item as well. So if it's questions, do that first, but we do have public comment before you discuss.
Questions were primarily around shapes of curbs, raised curb on the sidewalk when you're approaching. We put in a lot of work to get them rounded, but there were some new shapes that were applied in the San Pablo Avenue project. And I'd like to hear more from staff about a response to that. I need to be more specific.
Please, if you could let me know what the
That's fair.
question is there.
So in particular, the southwest corner of Castro and San Pablo Avenue, coming eastbound on the south side of Castro. This was a letter from Brian Martin, and he provided some great pictures. There's a raised curb that diagonally comes into, or appears to come into the sidewalk area. I haven't gone and looked at, diagonally comes into the sidewalk area. So I guess if you're not paying attention, there is a differentiated topping to the raised area, which is great. But in a low light situation or where you're not paying enough attention, you could end up tripping.
Yeah, so see if I can cover it. If not, we may need to bring it back for discussion with Public Works staff that could speak more specifically. But the design here and in several of these examples is to address the drop-off tripping risk at a curb ramp. And so the intention was to do a raised curb so it's more visible and not be caught by the drop-off at the ramp itself. And so that is the design intent, to make it clear where the path is a level path before getting to the ramp. And when the ramp design requirements means that it has to be further over to shift the path of travel before getting to that drop in the ramp.
Ken? Yes.
Yep. So I guess the questions are, can there be some more visual markings or taller bollards on those edges so that they show a little bit better? They're great if you're using a stick. They're gonna pop right up on your, if you're using an assistive device, but they're just not as visible. You're coming to a corner, you're paying attention to the traffic. I believe that's the intent of the point in the letter.
Understood. To distinguish, I would say specific issues at specific corners in the comments can be responded to by staff. If you're wanting changes to the design guidance to reflect potential additional elements, I would request not changing the guidance at this meeting, but I'm requesting that Public Works staff come back with that discussion before making changes. So if you're not ready to accept this guidance, we could bring it back at a future meeting to have that discussion. The guidance was meant to be iterative, so you could also accept this guidance and give direction that we should bring that. That's your call. But I would recommend or request that we not make changes without the relevant staff here tonight.
Okay. Anyone else? I have a quick question. Part of the rationale that Ken referred to this, for doing this, is to signal to people who are using canes, who are blind, that the curb is coming.
Yeah, so the guidance document was really an attempt to bring in all of the accessibility requirements and the new requirements that really have a lot of prescriptive detail on how we do design, with what elements from Albany's preferences we can fold into that on top of sort of the requirements, and putting that all in one place so that we have clear guidance to staff and to consultants that do design work for us, how we want designs of ramps done in Albany.
Well, perhaps at the end of the meeting, if we want to recommend a future agenda item, we can consider it then. So, anybody in the audience?
I had a question.
Oh.
Why did we not include any guidelines for raised crosswalks? Is it because we don't currently have any, or?
This guidance is specifically for our curb ramps design, so that would be independent. If we had a raised crossing, it would have its own more level connection to the.
Oh, so it wouldn't be considered a curb ramp, because it would, okay.
Yeah, I can bring that question back too if there's guidance we would want to more standardize, but generally those are done as a more level approach to the street versus ramping down to the street level.
Just as a follow-up, we do have some raised crosswalks near Curtis Street and Marin School. Is that right?
We have we have one at the senior center, outside the senior center across Masonic. We have one on Pierce along the 500 block. So yeah, we have a few local examples.
Anything else?
We do have public comment after.
Time for public comment.
Hi, my name's Brian Martin. I submitted the public comment through email. Two things about this item. One is the flooding at the southwest corner of Castro that the commissioner was talking about. I know that corner's done, but it seems like that broad ramp, that semicircle, however it's designed, it just floods all the way up to the building, and you can't actually use the sidewalk anymore when there's a heavy rain on San Pablo there. So I would recommend against that being used on any other San Pablo intersections. Maybe there's some other kind of design that would avoid that kind of flooding all the way up to the building that prevents pedestrians from actually using the sidewalk. The other issue, separate issue completely, is at that corner and at several other corners. The other photos I shared that showed where the curb elements come into the sidewalk right of way, and the guidelines specifically do say that it's a tripping hazard. And like I said in my email, sure enough, my wife tripped over one of them, and within a few weeks of them being completed. And so I've been going back and forth with Allison Carrillo, I think it is. I think she's in Public Works, but I don't know what department she's in. And she said that the city is going to be putting something on top of those curbs to make the more visible. The guidelines currently say that it's going to be made more visible by having a textured surface that's a different color. And so in my neighborhood around San Pablo, I live on Adams Street. It's this kind of looks red brickish concrete, but that's clearly not enough. And so the city is apparently designing something else, or going to be installing something else on top of those curbs to help with visibility. So my point was that the guidelines the guidelines should actually be whatever the city's going to install on there to improve the visibility. It shouldn't be what's in the document right now. And so if that can be wordsmithed tonight to add whatever the new visibility elements are going to be, that's great. Otherwise, I think it should come back or should be revised as soon as possible. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Any other comments from the audience or our online audience?
No further comments from.
Okay, then we need to approve item 5.2, so we're done with the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve 5.2?
I'll make a motion to approve 5.2 or 5.2.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay.
Roll call. Commissioner Baldwin.
Aye.
Commissioner Hiley.
Aye.
Commissioner Kerr.
Aye.
Commissioner Javindal.
Aye.
Commissioner McCroskey.
Aye.
Commissioner Zuba.
Aye.
And Chair Barnes.
Aye.
Motion
Motion.
carries.
So I do intend to bring that up as a future agenda item. I'll be more specific later.
Okay, moving on, item 6.1, discussion and possible action on matters related to conceptual design for the Jackson Street Bikeway.
Thank you, Chair. Is that Chair? So, some quick background on this item. The segment under discussion tonight is part of property owned by and maintained by the University of California. It's not a city street. In early 2021, UC Berkeley staff began finalizing project plans and initial designs for graduate student housing at the northeast corner of Jackson and Monroe Street. The housing was developed as a public-private partnership between the university and American Campus Communities, a private student housing development company. While not under city jurisdiction, the Albany Active Transportation Plan identifies desired pedestrian and cycling network connections in University Village and includes a project proposing a Class 1 shared use path along the east side of Jackson Street. A Jackson Street cycling facility would provide an important link for regional north-south route connections, recreational access, and the connection between University Village and the Berkeley campus. At the time, Albany staff began working with UC staff to discuss the potential for completing segments of the active transportation network envisioned in relation to the housing project that was under development. Concurrently, Alameda County Transportation Commission has been developing parallel bicycle improvements as part of the San Pablo Avenue Multimodal Corridor Program. This segment of Jackson Street is part of the identified parallel route, and Alameda CTC has allocated funding toward advancing design, which Albany is leading under a memorandum of understanding with Alameda CTC. So a wider shared use path was successfully incorporated into the graduate student housing project and was constructed in 2024. And one item to circle back on for commissioners that were involved in that phase, UC staff did end up authorizing removal of trees in the conflict with the path at the corner of Jackson and Monroe, and the path was continued to the intersection as part of the phase 1 construction. So there was, at the time when we previously discussed the concept, that was not part of the scope of construction of the housing, and we were having to merge onto the street north of the intersection with that first phase. So the transition to on-street cycling is at the intersection, reflected in the plans tonight. There are distinct segments to this project, the plans that you have before you tonight. In this aerial, Buchanan Street is to the north on the left of the slide, and Corneses Creek to the south is on the right. A separate project, Corneses Creek Phase 4, was also completed in 2024, and that completed the creek path segment between 8th Street and 10th Street on the far top right corner. Then this next phase of the Jackson Street Bikeway has 3 segments. It includes continuation of the off-street facility to the north to Buchanan, which is outlined in red. It includes striping and signage along the portion of the path completed by ACC, which is in the yellow box, and then on-street striping south of Monroe in blue. That's not very visible on the screen there. A future phase of this would address an off-street connection south of Monroe. Along the Gill track, the team evaluated various alternatives with relation to impacts on utilities, vehicle parking, and the College of Natural Resources research fields. The proposed concept design limits the impact on all 3 while providing a consistent facility and is consistent with the earlier concept that the Commission and Council reviewed. It utilizes approximately 5 to 6 additional feet from the research fields, converts the angled parking to parallel parking, and leaves the utility poles between the path and street curb. Here's a cross-section showing it's a 8-foot path with 2-foot buffers on either side with that shift of the fence. And this is cross-section from the earlier concept, but what is continued in the plans you have tonight. Along the Gill Tract frontage, the change from current angle parking to parallel parking removes approximately 9 vehicle spaces. There were additional changes to available off-street parking, both with the Ocean View Elementary reconstruction and the graduate student housing project. And so with that, I'll introduce Anthony Gorel with Zune Engineering, who's supporting the city staff as project manager on this effort, and he'll walk through the conceptual design.
Good evening, commission members. My name is Anthony Gorel with Zune Engineering. Pleasure to be here tonight. So what's really being presented tonight is an enhancement of what was previously presented. A lot of the right-of-way is still similar. The fence shift is all very similar. The path alignment's all very similar. What's really changing is to the north, you see the mixing zones in red to kind of give warning of both users of the path, bicycles, pedestrians, kind of anybody that uses the path. We also have bike boxes, and we also have guidance across Buchanan Street as well to help convey bicycle traffic. Questions?
Could we get you to speak into the microphone for the people at home?
Sorry, yeah. So yes, there'll be guidance across Buchanan Street, and then you'll have bike boxes, and then we're also shifting bicycles off of the path and onto Jackson Street a little early. That was already in the previous iteration as well. This is just now enhanced with more visible striping. So if we go to the next slide. Basically a continuation of the same. There will be ADA accessible curb ramps enhanced on both the pathway side and the non-pathway side as well. So they'll get new curb ramps. The design of the curb ramps is not done yet, so we don't even know what they're going to be quite yet. They will follow the guidelines, of course. And then really the big change is farther to the south, which is the driveway entrance for the Gill Tract. And so what we did is we shifted back the fence a little bit so that cars can park off the path and still keep that path open. And then it'll tie into the work that was already completed by the American Campus Communities Development. And then next slide. So this is the frontage in front of the American Campus Communities Development. Really all this is more striping. All the curb ramps have been done, so we're just going to complete the signing and striping aspect through there. And then the next slide. And then this is the shift south of Monroe, which transitions into on-street conveyance of bicycles. So there's Bicheros and some restriping there that connects them to Cornesis Creek. And as Justin said, the off-street piece of this will come at a later time. And I think that concludes my aspect of this.
Questions? Judy?
Yes, I'll go first. I know you said that off-street questions will come at a later time, and I'm not sure if my question, it doesn't relate to off-street issues, but it seems like this is a very feasible design for through traffic on bicycles and cars as well. But there's a fair amount of dismounting and mounting that has to happen with young kids going to the school. So is there a place that you envision where that's going to take place, where people coming into Ocean View at the very busy hours of school opening and school closing will have a place to get out of the flow of traffic and get off their bicycles?
Currently, we don't have an option for that, mostly because the space is rather limited on the pathway. They can pull over to the curb ramp side, but there isn't a lot of right-of-way there. What we are looking at is, instead of the planting strip in the utility poles, maybe changing that into pave, asphalt, or concrete. That might provide a buffer to do so, rather than having a planting strip there, so that could be an option, but that hasn't been decided quite yet.
Okay, thank you.
So you mentioned the addition of guidance at the intersection of Buchanan and Jackson, guidance off of Buchanan. One element I didn't notice and wonder if you guys considered in the context of thinking about our developing ATP and creating networks, there's difficulty going eastbound on Buchanan on that bike path to getting northbound on Jackson, so that left turn. Was that considered in the design at all?
We try to provide the most flexible options that we could, given the current budget constraints that we have. What we're not doing currently is a fourth dedicated pedestrian crossing. I think that's what you're getting at, maybe, is that side of Buchanan, Jackson, on the northbound side, the right side there. There is no dedicated pedestrian crossing because there's a lot more infrastructure that needs to be placed as part of that. What they can do is cross the street at Jackson and then, get in the bike box and go north that way, or they can cross Buchanan and then kind of merge onto the street that way too.
Okay,
So just given the options and the available funding, that's kind of the most flexible scenario we came up with.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ken?
Yeah, thanks for the plans. They look good. Can we go to the red box on the east side of Jackson and Buchanan?
Yeah, the mixing zone.
Yeah, the mixing zone. It's a little hard to tell what's a box and what's a panel in the that's flush. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, the mixing zone, the red, is really a thermoplastic treatment, or it could be colored concrete, I guess, too. That part hasn't been figured out quite yet either. This was kind of just the scenario we wanted to envision to, delineate where pedestrians and bicycles will be merging at an intersection, basically. So usually these are kind of a preformed thermoplastic marking that gets heated down, but I think there's options to, change the material type, do concrete, do a surface texture. But that would.
I don't think I was specific enough. I'm interested in where the placement of vertical boxes, utility boxes are.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And how the sight lines are managed and how that all fits together.
Right, okay, understood. Sorry. Yeah, so the electrical utility cabinets there too, for sure. So we're gonna have to move a couple of them to kind of get them out of the way. A lot of the ones to the west there will remain in place because it's not really in the way of the path, and we are widening the curb ramps there as well. So there will be a couple that need to be shifted. That hasn't been addressed quite yet in the plans, but that is something to come at a future phase, is where we move these, what's involved with that, where's the best place to relocate them to. The fence line already has a reentrant corner, which is kind of nice, so we can try to tuck as much back there and really out of the way in sight lines, but not all boxes are being envisioned to be relocated at the moment, just kind of what's necessary and what aligns with the budget that we have to do so.
It's just a little hard to tell from this illustration.
Yeah, it's a little blurry. We could potentially pull up the plans, and that has better resolution.
There was also, Justin, you showed us a photo of that intersection a little while ago, and
Yes,
that
that's
photo
true.
shows those boxes. Can I ask a question in the meanwhile?
Yeah, go for it.
Utility poles,
Yes.
is there a potential for people on that cycle track to smack into utility poles? I
There,
went through it pretty quickly.
there is a buffer. I think it's a 2-3 foot buffer. And again, that's space constraints by the Gill Tract and what we're borrowing. The university's allowing us to use. So, there's always the possibility to push farther, but the university's indicated they don't want to push the fence line any farther there, so it's a little bit of give and take. If there's always a possibility to hit the pole if you veer off course. It's not.
The reason I brought it up is you mentioned, first of all, is it a problem anywhere else except along the Gill Tract? Further south, is there an issue with utility poles?
No, those have all been undergrounded, and
okay.
that was part of the university's development. Farther south, though, there's something similar to, you'd have trees. It'd be kind of similar if you have trees along the
Okay.
frontage there.
But you mentioned the possibility of extending the asphalt out to make buffer zones for kids, but my concern was if you did that near the poles, then they would conceivably ride along the asphalt and be confronted by a pole.
Yeah, and I agree, it's not the best option. Also, you have traffic parking there too, and people opening and closing their doors, so that buffer zone is kind of a nice place to have and keep as a buffer zone. There is the driveway a little farther south that you could potentially pull off and dismount and walk across, but that is a little bit more.
What I was actually thinking of is those big pads they put on the ski resorts, they put on the base of the
Sure.
lifts, so if you smack them while you're skiing, you know.
Yeah, it's
you know,
not as hurtful. Yeah,
Just a thought.
yeah, that could definitely be considered.
So do we have a photo?
Yeah, so there's a traffic signal box by the one box there. That will probably likely need to be removed, and anything that conflicts with the curb ramp would also need to be removed as well.
So in this picture, what represents a vertical box that's going to stay there?
Probably the three little cluster.
One of them EB?
Yeah, where it says EB, that three little cluster will probably stay in place there. Because there's already a down guy anchor there for the utility pole as well. So, yeah, we definitely want to clear the space that we can. And some of these are electrical services too versus your street lights, which are a little bit more challenging to relocate.
So which box were you talking about moving?
The one that says TSB, and then there's a 2 TSB that's in, those might be, actually, I think those ones are pull boxes. So I think, are those all 3 pull boxes? I think those are all 3 pull boxes. So there's a cluster. Can you pull up the picture? I'm actually having a hard time recalling too.
There it is.
Okay. So that big kind of cabinet looking thing there,
Yeah,
maybe the one that is likely the one that gets relocated.
okay.
But the
So it'd
service
be a
pedestal,
smaller cluster,
right?
looks like.
Yeah, a lot of those other ones were marked out as pull boxes, so my apologies on the confusion there. But the service cabinet is likely the one that needs to be relocated.
And that's going to pull back further diagonally?
Yeah, we'd like to push it back to where those trees are. There's the fence kind of makes a little re-entrant corner there, and try to tuck it out of the way. That would be the ideal scenario.
Great. So it sounds like you're looking at moving boxes out of the way that way, and that'll help folks who are turning or watching for traffic coming from the left, if you're going northward on this pathway. What about traffic coming from the right? There's a fence there, there's a lot of bushes.
Yeah, there are. We did look at that when we were out on site. A lot of that picture's a little misleading because it's not that heavy, dense growth. Some of those shrubs will have to be removed as part of the project. Trees will have to be removed as part of the project. So they'll open up, and then that fence line gets pushed more to the east as well, which will, that also encumbers the trees a little bit. But that will open up some site visibility there. And the rest of the site should be okay. The fence, that's the gill tract. We can't really move that or relocate that, but as long as there's some clear view through there, you'd be able to see. The other part of the mixing zone is to slow everybody down beforehand and put signage there too. I know that may not always happen, but that is why we're making that red and trying to delineate and put signs there so that everybody coming into that intersection does slow down and is warned to do so.
Would it be possible to lengthen that red zone out a little bit to the east as part of a warning?
Yeah.
Moving on, I noticed that you're adding some crossings, or at least improving, making some crossings connect between this pathway and the crossings that exist currently. I'm sorry, I'm moving to where that visual is for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And they look mixed. The ones, I don't know if I have a location, but it's essentially the southern driveway of the school. It looks like the crossing from the path on the east side is pretty wide, and that there are corner crossings on the south side, they're pretty wide. But if you go back a little bit to the south, very close to the, probably the driveway from the gill tract, or just south of that, that crossing seems to be in the project plan, and the widths of those crossings are much narrower as depicted. And you said you were still working on those, so.
Yeah, those haven't really been flushed out about what they're going to look like. It was kind of pictorially placed there for the concept, at least at this point. The one south of the school, if I recall correctly, there's a drainage inlet there, and there's some drainage pipe, so there's going to be some constraints we have to work around there with what's already underground. But it is being considered. Right now, I mean, the primary focus is the pathway, the alignment of the pathway, the shift of the fence line, and then kind of the proposed areas of improvement, which include the curb ramps. But yeah, I don't have any detailed design or what those are exactly going to look like. I'm sure there'll be feedback that we get on that, and trying to conform with the guidelines that have been developed as well. But yeah, I mean, the city's always been intent on making them wider if we can possibly do that. Yeah. Thank you. No worries.
Other questions?
I do have one more quick question. Well, I hope it's quick. I didn't see in the design that there was any reference to wheelchair access to the school, and I'm wondering if there is a blue zone, a blue ramp, a blue curb, and a side entry van access point in this design, or if that comes later.
As far as I know, it's not incorporated in this design, especially for the school, because the school's already been constructed as part of that, and we're not necessarily touching their drop-off area, which I would imagine would be the place to put it, or in a parking zone too.
So none of this plan touches the drop-off areas?
No.
Okay, clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
There is a drop-off, accessible parking space in the drop-off zone. I would argue that the sidewalk at that point is very narrow.
Anything else? So this is an item just to provide comments. We don't need to take a vote? Is
We
that-
do have public comment for this item and then can bring it back for discussion.
Carrie Schulman, feel free to talk.
Hello. Thank you for working on this. I think this is going to be some nice improvements. My daughter attends Ocean View Elementary, and I bike to and from the school with her every day, so I'm very familiar with this area. I'm disappointed to see that there's basically no connection with the school with these plans. The school is kind of an island, and the bike path goes around it, never actually connecting with the school. And I think that's a real missed opportunity. It would make parents feel comfortable with their kids biking to school if it would connect with it. Most importantly, the only way coming from the north heading south towards Ocean View, the only place you can cross Buchanan is on the west side of Jackson, and the bike path is on the east side of Jackson. And the street kind of curves, and so there's kind of a dead space on the street where cars just kind of line up when it gets crowded during pickup and drop-off times. The sidewalk could be expanded there and make a lot more room for the bikes to comfortably access and safely access the school. So it would be really wonderful if this project could be expanded to include the west side of Jackson and allow kids to bike to school there. The other thing is, I don't know if this is in the scope of the project, but north of Buchanan, right now it's just Sharrows when you're heading north. Heading south, there's a bike path, which is great. But when you're headed north, it's Sharrows. And cars, it's a double yellow line, but cars always just go over the double yellow line and unsafely pass me. And if a car is coming south, that car is just going to swerve back over and run me and my child over. So if there could be northbound bike paths, that would really be a huge improvement. And then my last minor point is the new addition in front of the new development, that wide sidewalk there. Right now, there's zero indication that that's allowed for bikes to use that. There's no striping, there's no bike signs, there's no anything. So hopefully that can be added to have some sort of indication that that's allowed for bikes to bike there. But most importantly, if you could somehow connect this project with Ocean View instead of treating it like an island so that kids can actually use this path to get to school, that would be really wonderful and a great improvement. Unfortunately, my fifth grader will or my fourth grader will unlikely be here when it's done, but hopefully future children can benefit from this project. So thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Amy Smollins, feel free to speak.
Hi there. I pass this area by foot and on my bike a lot when kids are arriving and at the end of the day, and it's definitely a ball of confusion with drivers going in and out to drop kids and often pick kids up, and it's really not safe for the parents and kids and staff who are walking and biking and scooting to and from school, especially the younger ones, since so many of the cars have such high fronts now, and it's really hard to see the kids. So this is a really welcome project. It's also a really complicated project, so I know it's not perfect, but I trust your commission, as you already have been, to really sweat the many details. And please take into account what Carrie said. I think she's got some really important points of view. Also, please make sure that there's reflective treatments on any of the obstacles, because dawn, dusk, just foggy days, you need reflective treatments, and please make sure the paint is the type that isn't slippery when wet, crumbled shells in it or whatever. But thanks for working to make it safer for kids to walk and roll to school, kids and parents and staff to walk and roll to school. Thank you.
No additional public comment.
Okay, back to council members, or sorry, commissioner members. Ken?
So, I'm sorry, I usually start with a positive, but I'll get to that in a minute. It occurred to me suddenly that the Buchanan pathway has a conduit running under it that could be used for future lighting. I understand there's some street lighting from street lights in this area, but could we also include a conduit that's connected to the Buchanan pathway conduit, so that if we decide to go for specific lighting in the future, specific dedicated lighting for the pathway in the future, that could coordinate with the Buchanan path?
Yeah, that's always an option for sure. I guess the construction methodology now is they can do directional drilling with minimal impact to a lot of these paths too, and it's pretty easy to install later as well. So it's never out of the question for future phases. I think what it comes down to is, what budget we have for, and once we kind of get our engineers' estimates together and, see what we can provide to improve without taking away with some of the safety and other visibility aspects we've already incorporated into the project. So it'll be something we could probably weigh out, and it's a good idea for sure. I don't know if it can be incorporated as part of this project quite yet.
Maybe it's just where you're digging out and moving boxes at the corner, because that would be the intersection with the Buchanan pathway where the conduit would be. Maybe you start something and you don't run it down the whole path. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to bring that up.
Sure.
So I do want to say, I like the bike box as a adaptation for folks who are trying to go from eastbound to northbound. Obviously, with Sharrows further north on Jackson, it's not a complete solution, but it's absolutely an improvement. I would love to see the curb ramps wider for shared use with micromobility and walkers and scooter users and baby carriages and everything else. And not just to get between the school and the path, but to get from UC Village onto the path and perhaps to go into the rest of Albany. It's not just a school path, obviously. It's a major north-south school route. I'm sorry, transportation route. I understand that this project mostly focuses on what can be accomplished on Albany and UC property. And I think you've done a good job of maximizing that space, and I appreciate that. And I'm perfectly comfortable with this project as long as we continue to consider access to the school in future considerations like the active transportation plan. Because there are absolutely issues on the west side of the street and further afield in terms of getting to and from the school. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Great.
I think this is great. I understand it'd be nice to have the bike path along the school. On the other hand, with the cars going in and out, the way the school drop-off is designed, that could create conflicts. So I don't take issue with that at all. I think that in terms of the conflict zones at the corners, marking those, my tendency would be to go towards colored concrete rather than a surface treatment that's going to wear out and potentially be a traction issue. There are certainly very high friction surfaces, but given the number of kids using those, to the extent that those double as sandpaper, might not be something we want to go that far in that direction of high friction treatment. So colored concrete seems like the good balance to me. I do like the off-ramp from the path to northbound Jackson. I would love to see another one of those right into the bike box at the intersection. It just would be easier to get to once there's a queue of cars for a bike to sort of bypass the queue and then get onto the street. So that would be something to consider. To Ken's point of trying to have accommodation for future lights, and this is just a general comment, I think solar lights are becoming more and more common and easy to do, so I'm not terribly concerned about putting conduit in now. Certainly in Berkeley, we just started using solar lights everywhere we could because it was much cheaper than running conduit. If we come to the southwest corner of the intersection where we've got the other conflict zone, I think we could help that one if the school were willing to work with us to kind of cut off the corner of the school fence. We've got this hard corner of the chain link fence there, and if we just open that up a little bit, that pinch point would be alleviated substantially. And this may be outside the scope of this project, but leaving the space between the fence and the path extending south on Jackson would really alleviate that bottleneck as well. So whether we have an opportunity to do it or just remind the school district, please try to incorporate that. They've needed that for a long time. But
Have you noticed the recent improvement?
I haven't. Have they done something since the last street view?
Something I was pursuing for some time, and the school took it on, and they actually put in decomposed granite between the degraded asphalt 4-foot wide sidewalk and the fence line. There's some trees there. It makes it, so there's some challenges there, but and that's part of what I was talking about analyzing for the future.
No, that's definitely a good direction. The number of kids, certainly when my kids were there, that were riding scooters with the little tiny wheels, that wouldn't have been a great surface for them to ride on, but we'll take what we can get. Thank you.
And those are all being considered too. We do have many discussions regarding what we can improve and kind of maximize as part of this project, but with the understanding that we do have limited funds at the moment.
Any other comments?
Yeah, so speaking to the connectivity from the public comments and what the other commissioners have said, it sounds, at least thankfully, that we're not creating any like bottlenecks or things that are going to prevent future improvements. If there is extra money, I understand that's a constraint, but it would be great to push any of that forward now as much as possible to try to improve the connection to the school and on the westbound side. But it is good to see that at least it's not creating difficulties for doing that in the future. And I definitely support future discussions about that. It's probably not in the scope of this project, but maybe like an all-way cross going diagonally for all pedestrians in all directions. But yeah, definitely want to keep that conversation open. I really support the public comment on that. And And then another comment about the off-ramps and on-ramps. I understand at the Monroe intersection, there might not be so much you could do, but those angles sometimes, those kind of looked a little harsh. So if there's any way to like soften that curve on and off of the on-ramps, especially if we're expecting younger riders might not be so nimble on their bike, could help to just ease that transition on and off.
Anyone else? I have a couple of quick ones. Do we have an estimated completion date on this project?
We're targeting summer next year, trying to get through.
Summer of '26?
Yeah, and trying to get through environmental, and then finish up the design. So environmental, this has federal funding. Caltrans is involved through the expenditures of the funds, so we have involvement with them as oversight. So we have to get through environmental, and then we have to basically do a right-of-way agreement with the university and kind of have Caltrans, agree to it as well, that the funds are being used appropriately. Those are really, I think, the main pieces. And then the rest of it, advancing the plans should go fairly quick. But
Okay, and then one last quick question. Do we know if the housing project there is fully occupied?
I don't know if they're fully occupied. I know that pathway in front of it is already completed and constructed. So part of that is routing the sharrows up to that is the available space that they have when they built those ramps there too. And then future phases will hopefully have a more direct route, less, weaving or, jogging of the sharrows a little bit. So hopefully help that. I don't know the occupancy of the building though.
Yeah, I was just curious if we're going to see more traffic, more pedestrian traffic, more foot traffic in the future. And what we see now is not what we'll see in the future. There'll be more. But we can find out. It's not a big deal. So we are done with 6.1. Any other comments? Sorry, Ken?
I missed thanking any and all staff for their efforts to get the pathway in along the new development and all the way to the intersection.
Okay,
Thanks for your time.
thank you. Okay, item 6.2, all ages and abilities, facilities guidance. Again, this is not a voting item. We're just to provide comments to staff on this one.
Thank you, Chair. There we go. So a little background on this item. At the December Commission meeting, there was a lot of discussion on the existing conditions analysis for the active transportation plan regarding the depiction of bicycle level of comfort on city streets and the bicycle facilities that would serve all ages and abilities. The Commission approved a motion to move to further offline discussion of the bicycle level of comfort and possible node and links iteration of the mapping. Since that meeting, the consultants presented on the active transportation plan at the February 18 City Council meeting and included changes based on the December 5th Commission discussion, including distinguishing fully separated facilities as a highest level of comfort category and separate mapping of intersections along bikeways that are uncontrolled for streets crossing the bike facility. The council comments on that item included direction to further adjust this, removing the highest comfort category and moving all local streets to medium comfort. Staff is presenting this all ages and abilities follow-up discussion with the Commission to share how it has been widely incorporated into facility selection and ensure a shared understanding of this as we move forward in the active transportation planning process. So at the county level, in 2022, Alameda County Transportation Commission adopted a resolution setting an all ages and abilities bikeways standard for the countywide bikeways network. Corridors in Albany on this network include the Albany Greenway, the Bay Trail, San Pablo Avenue, and Buchanan and Marin. These are identified as a network of conceptual corridors with the note that they reflect conceptual alignments, which could be on an arterial corridor or nearby parallel routes. Alameda County Transportation Commission, or Alameda CTC policy, references the National Association of City Transportation Officials, or NACTO, contextual guidance for selecting all ages and abilities bikeways for how to achieve this all ages and abilities standard. And I'll describe that further in a minute. At the regional level, also in 2022, MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, adopted the Regional Active Transportation Network, which includes the Alameda CTC countywide bicycle network corridors. MTC's updated Complete Streets policy incorporated all ages and abilities principles for facilities of the Regional Active Transportation Network. Projects on this regional network seeking MTC funding or endorsement are expected to incorporate design principles based upon the All Ages and Abilities guidance issued by NACTO and public rights-of-way accessibility guidelines, or PROAG, from the U.S. Access Board. So what is this contextual guidance that everyone is referencing? The key feature is this chart, which identifies bicycle facilities' suitability based upon roadway characteristics, including vehicle speeds, volumes, and number of lanes. It also identifies additional operational considerations, including peak hour volumes, curbside activity, bus activity, congestion, and turning conflicts. And it lists a number of different facility types, many of which are likely familiar to the Commission, coordinated with various levels of speed and volume. And briefly to go through those, the first one is what's called a shared street, which is basically a street that is shared by all users. It's not one that we have locally an example of, but has very slow vehicle volumes when they're working through that street, and it's an environment that is indicated that pedestrians have priority within the street, and all users must move with caution. Bicycle boulevards, we have a number of these, are intended to be have very low volumes and speeds, either because that's the existing design and use of the street, or there are additional traffic calming or filtering or diverting elements to maintain those speeds and volumes. Buffered and conventional bicycle lanes, we have examples of both of these in the city, or when there's a striped space within the roadway dedicated for cycling. And then protected bicycle lanes, also known as separated bike lanes or cycle tracks, use that horizontal separation that we have in bicycle lanes, along with a vertical separation from vehicle traffic. And then finally, shared use and bicycle paths like the Albany Greenway or the Buchanan Bikeway in Albany, where it's fully separated from the street infrastructure. Just last month, NACTO issued the third edition of the Urban Bikeway Design Guide, which has an update to this guidance. It's largely consistent with the earlier guidance. It has some adjustments to the terminology, no longer conventional bike lane or buffered bike lane. It's a constrained bike lane or constrained bike lane with buffer, and some of the volume and speed guidance is adjusted slightly, but largely parallels the earlier reference. So as we look to the future bicycle network, we'll need to develop how we as a city approach facility guidance, be it the NACTO guidance or choosing to deviate from that for the Albany network, and where we look to add facilities or change roadways to meet that. And this presentation really was to set the context for as we enter phase 2 and some of those discussions, and make sure we have this background of how it's been incorporated in national as well as regional and county guidance. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
Questions, commissioners?
Yeah, sure. So you referenced some previous comments to nodes or intersections, and it looks like the NACTO guidelines mostly focus on segments by being driven by vehicle speed and volume. So in cities' application of these guidelines, is there any additional consideration for the nodes or intersections?
There is separate guidance document on how to deal with intersections. A lot of the analysis that focuses on facility selection really focuses on the roadway characteristics separate from the intersections, but there's been follow-up work to really try to design intersections that match that level of separation or level of comfort.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a comment and a question, and it sort of foreshadows our next discussion on the agenda. But NACTO may or may not, I have no idea, and maybe you can give me some guidance on this, be looking at ways to incorporate personal mobility, motorized personal mobility devices that operate up to 25 to 30 miles an hour. So are you aware of NACTO publishing anything that will bring that into the conversation? Because it would seem appropriate to have that information in our active transportation plan going forward. They're here, they're now, and we need some guidelines. Is NACTO going to give us relief?
There is some guidance and research work that NACTO and others have done on mobility, range of mobility devices, and how to start designing for those or accommodating those in facility designs. So I think Ben will be going into some of that in this meeting, but it's definitely been a topic that we've identified for the active transportation plan as well, in terms of how we address the wider range of devices that are using our facilities today.
Any other questions? Questions from the audience?
Former transportation commissioner. I'm glad to be here in the audience tonight. So it looked on the schedules, it looked like a major cutoff point is that 25 mile an hour threshold of either less than or equal to 25 miles per hour is one thing and greater than is another thing. I'm curious how do people feel that Albany's streets measure up in that respect? I think most of the streets in the town don't have specific speed limit signs. I think the assumption is speed limit 25 are not otherwise specified. The actual behavior of drivers may be that they're typically driving between 25 and 30 on those streets. I'm just kind of curious how to apply those criteria, whether we as a city consider our local non-arterial streets to be less than or equal to 25 or greater than 25.
We have one comment from the audience. Ryan Martin, you should be able to talk.
Hi, yes, this is Brian Martin. My question was, I was wondering about, so I want to focus on Adams and Keynes, that the document says, I think the county puts it in as a AAA for all people of all abilities. And so I think that's helpful to think about why is that designated available for all people of all abilities? Because in the end, really the only thing that's different about it from any other residential street in Albany is that it has pictures of bicycles painted on it. It has some signage here and there that just says, bikes can go in this direction or that direction, but doesn't really say anything otherwise. There's no separation. There's no any kind of, there's future plans for maybe painting lines on the streets, but for bicycle lane, but that, we don't know where that is. I haven't heard anything more about that. But so basically people are just mixing with cars on the street, just like they would on any other street. So, and the speed limit presumably is 25. So how does that end up getting to be considered people for all abilities? And is that something that really should be reconsidered? Because I don't think people would want to put their elementary school age kids on it any more than they would any other residential street. Thanks.
No additional comments from the audience.
So, final questions or comments from commissioners? Ken?
So I'm going back and forth between the two tables. And the first table seems to indicate that all ages and abilities cycling facilities are considered realistic on a shared street with less than 10 miles per hour speed limit, or average speed, or targeted speed I see here, and that a bicycle boulevard with a targeted speed of less than or equal to 20 miles per hour could be considered an all ages and abilities bicycle facility. Currently, the only street in Albany that's limited to 20 miles an hour is Solano. I don't think any of us would think of that as an all ages and abilities street. The second table doesn't actually list what is considered an all ages and abilities facility. It does list various types of facilities. Am I missing something, or is that basically what we got? Is there some way to interpret the second table about what is considered all ages and abilities under the current guidelines?
I don't have the supporting document associated with the table in front of me, but I read it as the same type of guidance where it's giving you the speeds associated with being appropriate for that type of facility. It's similar to the earlier table.
So less than 20 miles per hour in a shared space, or on a bicycle boulevard and less than 10 miles per hour on a shared space with different volumes. And okay.
Right, so I can pull it back up, hold on. The part that has no longer a distinction, so in the earlier guidance, a bicycle boulevard was appropriate for under 20 miles per hour for volumes 1,000 to 2,000 max daily volume, but it also had a slightly lower volume but slightly higher speed version that was considered appropriate to the under 25 miles per hour, but 500 to 1,500 daily volume was also okay at a bicycle boulevard threshold. So that
if you added protected spaces.
Going from the top row, the top part of the under 25 miles per hour across to 500 to 1,500 target maximum daily volume, going across as long as it's under 50 motor vehicles per hour peak. As a operational consideration, you're in the bicycle boulevard zone for all ages and abilities. It had a separate line that ended at Bicycle Boulevard that's under 20 miles per hour, under or equal to 1,000 to 2,000 daily volume. So that sort of separate speed volume threshold has gone away in this new document where it's just under 20 miles per hour and 500 to 2,000. So they've done away with saying that there's a lower volume but higher speed acceptable version of the bike boulevard there. That's the main, thing that's changed, I think, in the guidance between the two.
Thank you for walking me through that.
Anything else? If not, we'll move on to item 6.3, regulating micromobility devices on trails.
I'm sorry. What kind of guidance was staff looking for?
Just comment discussion, I think, more food for thought on what we'll need to really work through in the next phase, barring there being, an instant coalescing of direction from the commission on this. I think it's more just making sure that commissioners and the public that's listening, but we'll continue to talk through this when we do the next phase of outreach, want to understand how we get from the lens of thinking about the wide range of users we want comfortable on our facilities to actually selecting facilities or thinking about roadway treatment changes to try to match either this type of guidance or something that we're setting for our city. But that's getting to how we operationalize some of the discussion we had in December will be what we need to work through.
So in the future, we'll be classifying different roads as these different categories?
So the next phase of the active transportation plan will be building our vision for a future network. So it'll be looking at where we say for the bike network, we want facilities that aren't on the map today. And we may also be looking at, hey, these are the bike boulevards we have identified and we've got striped, but we may, based on the comments and based on this guidance or other that we set, say we want to look at volumes or look at how we address speeds to make it more meeting in all ages and abilities. I think it'll be what we have to work through. I think part of the challenge with just thinking about all facilities are not comfortable for everyone, we need to do everything, means it's all a prioritization game. So to the extent that we can be more targeted with where we are saying we want facilities or changes, it's a little clearer path to then setting up projects for the third round. But to the extent that we're able to coalesce on what threshold we're aiming for with that phase 2 discussion, it'll just make it that much clearer how we then develop projects from there.
And did you get what you needed tonight? Sorry. You can all submit comments later, correct?
Yeah, if folks have initial reaction or response or, like this or think we definitely need to be setting a different bar, like I think some initial reaction, if folks have it, would be useful for us. But we do plan to bring this kind of discussion into what we have for phase 2. But if you have thoughts that will help us shape that engagement, that would be useful.
Yeah, I do. I think it's a good baseline, a good starting point, but I would push us to go further and strive for even better, even more comfort than what's defined. So especially because these guidelines seem to be kind of limited in the parameters that it considers, and I get that for the ease of and simplicity of these analyses, it might not be feasible to consider so many parameters. Of course, I would love that, but I guess with that in mind, since it could be more limited, yet another reason for us to push to strive beyond these standards and just use it as a minimum and set a high standard.
So I was going to comment, I agree. I think that we should certainly have a high aspirational goal. And even if for pragmatic reasons we don't achieve that on every project, we should know, hey, we're hitting that goal or we're coming, a little bit short, and we understand why. But I agree. Let's not just totally sell ourselves short, because sometimes we're going to achieve that aspirational goal, and eventually we will, because we can always keep incrementally improving things. The other thing that you mentioned earlier that I completely agree with, and I don't want to, beat this too much, is the concept of links and nodes. I think this is, really good for the link assessments. The combination of speed and volume are really important, because taking one in the absence of the other is not giving you a good picture. So we need both. I think we need something similar at the nodes, at the intersections, that looks at, do you have a protected separate phase from vehicles? If you don't, what's the volume of vehicles crossing the bike lane, the crosswalk, the whatever it might be that the active transportation mode is using, that then vehicles are crossing and creating a conflict? So that volume and potentially the speed. Is this a slow-moving turn? Because sometimes we can influence that as well in our design. So it sets a design objective. Leading pedestrian interval is great. I mean, that's good. Sometimes, no right on red, can cut both ways. It really, depends on how you're using it, when you're using it, or using it only when there's a conflicting mode. But anyway, like I said, I didn't want to delve too far into that. I think that is a continuing area for us to explore and try to optimize. But the stuff that I'm seeing on the links, if we can start to fit that into how we assess the nodes, I think we'll end up with something very consistent and valuable.
Did I interrupt you before? Did you have a comment? So I'm assuming, can I assume that these sorts of issues are what you have in mind for the ATP discussion that's coming down the road? Pardon the expression.
Yes, this will all be input for how we do the next phase of engagement with the public, and then eventually bring back for the commission discussion.
I may have missed something, but how can I access the slideshow that you presented? Because I want to take another look at the comfortability on the different bike paths.
I can post the slides after the meeting to the agenda packet.
Ken?
Yeah, some good comments, and I just want to add that when I look at this, it looks to me, especially looking at that second table, that really the gold standard for an all ages and abilities bikeway, and I'm glad you brought up walkers as well, because it's crossings, it's all the users. But for cycling, it's really low volume, 10 miles an hour or less. We have limited ability to change the speeds on our streets. We have not been aggressive in use of tools. We use speed humps for the most part. So this leads me to the point that where we're looking to encourage families to move around the city, we really have to look at protected bikeways.
Okay, we need to move on, but that raises an issue when we say we have limited ability. It used to be the state, more or less the state minimum designated speed was 25 miles an hour, but there's a bill that changed that, and now cities have the ability to lower their speed limits. Isn't that correct?
We have the ability now to lower, I think, by 5 miles per hour a certain percentage of the city. So that likely will be something we're looking at as we get further in the ATP to see what guidance that will have for where we might want to advance that within Albany.
Okay. All right, can we move on? We're good? Okay. 6.3, regulating micromobility devices on trails.
Great. Thank you. So a little background on this. item is at the December 5th, 2024 Commission meeting, Commissioner McCroskey requested that speed indicator signage on trails be discussed at an upcoming meeting. So here we are. Just going to go through kind of quickly a little bit about perceptions of speed on paths and trails. Very briefly, the state and local laws regulating speeds on trails, and then go through the strategies to regulate speed on trails in Albany. And again, we're just asking for commissioners to provide comments to staff. So just looking at a few studies, there is seemingly a perception of speed from e-bike users that doesn't necessarily align with the reality on the ground. This is, granted, these are just 3 studies, but in the city of Fort Collins, the city of Vancouver, and the county of Pinellas in Florida, there was, all 3 studies kind of showed roughly that e-bikes and regular bicycles were going at roughly the same speed. We recognize that, we don't have local data right now to gauge whether there's folks exceeding the speed limit on motorized micromobility devices on paths and trails in Albany, and that perception is real, and we need to account for it, which is why we're providing this presentation. But just to note that there is sometimes a perception that doesn't line up with the facts on the ground, at least according to 3 studies. Going into state and local laws about who gets to regulate paths and trails, we dug into a variety of state, regional, and local laws, and effectively they suggest that local jurisdictions have the ability to regulate who uses trails, how they use them, and set speeds on trails. So I think that's the takeaway from this slide. So this is the existing bike network in Albany, and these are kind of the multi-use paths throughout the city. We've got the San Francisco Bay Trail, the Pierce Street Path, the Buchanan Bikeway, the Cordonesis Creek Path, and the Albany Greenway. And for the purposes of this discussion, I think we're going to focus on the Albany Greenway because it's the most popular trail in the city, and I think this is where a lot of the perceptions and potentially realities are related to speed discrepancies on trails. But we can apply this to any of the trails in the city. So we dug into a variety of different kind of potential regulation strategies for speeds on trails. And we put this in the memo to the commissioners. But I think the kind of overarching kind of 3 buckets are you can regulate through signage and markings, you can regulate through public awareness and education, and you can regulate through infrastructure-based strategies. There's also enforcement, but we didn't want to touch that in this conversation. So just kind of breaking that down into what those look like. You can regulate speed on trails with speed limits and signage to suggest what the speed limit is. This is a photo taken by Commissioner McCroskey on the Lafayette Moraga Trail, noting that the speed limit on the trail is 15 miles per hour. There's also kind of slow zones and reduced speed signs. This is on the Swamp Rabbit Trail in Greenville, South Carolina, where they kind of bifurcate the trail and create one space for kind of slower users and one space for faster users. there's slow zone pavement marking. So this is on the Tillicum Crossing, the fairly new bridge in Portland, Oregon, that has markings that suggest that this is an area to go slowly as a cyclist. And then there's yield and right-of-way signs and markings, and this is from the just finished trail along the Cordonices Creek, and we've got some new signage that suggests that bicyclists yield to pedestrians, and both cyclists and pedestrians yield to turkeys. But kind of designated who's got the right-of-way on trails. And then there's this, we didn't find a lot of examples of this, but there are examples of speed detection signage along trails where, you're told what your speed is along the trail, or in this photo that you're going too fast because you're exceeding the speed limit. This is from the Spring Creek Greenway in Harris County, Texas. There's also public awareness and education campaigns. So the digital and print media campaign strategy is, basically putting up signage, oftentimes with some sort of QR code to say, hey, look further, this is what we expect of you. But, nice signage just to remind folks that to be respectful and share the trail. This is in Boulder, Colorado, taking that to the next level. There's kind of the human interaction piece of this, and there's the Slow and Say Hello campaign in Marin. And these are kind of specific events where people get together, they go out on the trail, and they just kind of provide awareness about sharing the space and being respectful of one another. And then there's the trail ambassador programs, which are seen around the country, which are a more sustained kind of version of the kind of one-off events where you have volunteer ambassadors that kind of go out on the trails and provide friendly guidance as to how to share the trail on a more regular basis. This example is in Grand County, Arizona. And then there's infrastructure-based strategies. So this is from another example in Arizona where they have kind of tiny little speed humps along the aviation path in Tucson, but there's, other, we were just discussing, Anthony was presenting of the kind of markings on the ground or some sort of rumble strip where you can kind of say, hey, this is a slow zone or a shared space, a mixing zone, so slow down right here. And another, good example of best practices is along the Albany Greenway, where we have separated users, at least with striping, where we kind of designate one space for cyclists and another space for pedestrians. And then finally, there's trail widening. So this is an example on the Burke-Gilman Trail in Seattle, Washington. I think this is a rendering along next to the University of Washington campus. So, and if there are so many users that it's not possible to respect each other in any other way, there's always a possibility to widen the trail to make it more accessible for folks or safe for folks. So that's kind of the toolbox that we have. And so just some prompt questions for the discussion amongst the commissioners is, I think the first question is, what is the primary issue we're trying to address here? Is it speed, or is it, there's other issues to get at, right? So noise, pollution, the mass or weight of the devices that are being used, the width of the devices that are being used on the trail. Maybe we just care about the vehicle type, and we don't care about all those other factors. And maybe we just care about user behavior. So kind of trying to get at what's the issue that we're trying to solve for. Question number 2 is what is the scale and severity of this issue? Is it pretty pervasive? Is it on more than the Albany Greenway, or are we really just talking about the Albany Greenway here? thinking about the short-term approaches that the commission's interested in pursuing to resolve the issues, if any, and recognizing that we, are time and budget constrained as a city. But are there some short-term solutions that you saw in this presentation, or are there other ideas that you have that, we might use to address the issue of conflicts on trails? And then finally, thinking about the ATP and the more long-term approaches to these issues. I think the first question is, were there any strategies in this presentation that were compelling, any others that you have? But also, in the 2012 ATP, we talked about, we designated kind of slow routes and fast routes. And just thinking about that a little bit, this is maybe not a discussion that we hash out so much tonight, but as we're diving into the ATP in the coming months, is that kind of the designation that we want to continue thinking about as we plan for the future active transportation network throughout the city? So those are the prompting questions, and we invite you to ask questions to me or to discuss with each other. And hopefully this presentation was helpful in addressing your question from December 5th, Commissioner McCroskey.
Do you want to start, Ken?
Just briefly, yeah, I think it has been helpful to move us along. Previous discussions were driven from some complaints and some questions about, do we have a speed limit on the Greenway, for example? And I'm not sure we do. We also had a discussion about micromobility devices and the laws that seem to be changing fairly constantly. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was a general consensus from that discussion with the old commission that behavior was more important than mode. And we could spend a lot of time chasing different modes, but what we really want is appropriate sharing of the spaces and speeds. So I throw that back to Michael and Fareed, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I agree. Behavior matters a lot. It's just like when you've been driving your clunky old car and then you buy a new car, you think your behavior is the same, but you're really going about 20 miles an hour faster because the new car is so much smoother. I got a ticket once for that. So it's, it still is a little bit of a mix. I will say though, and just, riding my commute bike around Albany, and this may be a class thing, I don't perceive it to be as much a problem as when I'm cycling over in Marin, where kids have a little more income. But
so I may have moved us into the comment period by mistake, and I apologize.
I tend to do that myself.
I was trying to give some background without making comments, but I may have failed.
So yeah, I will save my comments for the comment section. So
I don't have any questions either. I'll wait for comments.
Shall we open it up for public comment?
sure, let's, do we have any, we do have some participation from the audience we need to do.
We have one in the room and 2 online.
Thanks for looking at this. I do think it's really important to understand the nature of the problem, and I appreciate that that was the first item in the presentation, and I would really urge the commission to start with asking that question. Is there a problem? What is the nature of the problem? Is it a problem about speed, or is it a problem about something else about people's behavior that's causing the problem? If the problem turns out to be speed, I just had a few reactions to some of the ideas that were shown in the pictures. I think the rumble strips or tiny speed humps are terrific. They maybe do too expensive or awkward to apply in a lot of places. I don't know, but I think that would really make a difference to people's speed. I think the feedback signs saying you're going too fast were very useful. I think a lot of people probably don't know how fast they're going. If they have a speedometer installed on their bike, it may not be adjusted correctly, or they may not be paying attention to it. I assume e-bikes probably have built-in speedometers, but again, I don't know how much people watch them. Also keep in mind that we have a culture, a pervasive culture in this country, everywhere in this country, that if you see a speed limit sign, that's an instruction telling you that the speed you should drive is 3 to 5 miles an hour faster than that. And if you're going as low as the speed limit, there's something wrong with you. It's a serious problem, and it's something we just have to live with. We can't change that culture. And I suspect if we put in signs saying speed limit 15, and if people were watching their speedometers and saw that they were going 18 to 20, they would think that's fine. So that's why, in particular, the sample image that showed you were going too fast is a little bit more useful than just one showing how fast you're going. If we really want to keep people below 15, we have to be more explicit about that. Thanks.
We have two folks raising their hand online. Carrie Schulman, go ahead.
Hello again. I was curious with the presentation if there's any data on the effectiveness of any of those solutions that were presented. Just curious, because I think that'd be really helpful in picking a good solution. I personally think the idea of separated lanes would be a really great idea, and to encourage people to separate based on speed, not based on mode. So transit maybe going over 10 miles per hour could use the fast lanes, and the ones going less could use different lanes. I was pretty impressed with that picture in the presentation that had all the pedestrians actually in the pedestrian lanes and all the bikes actually in the bike lanes on the Greenway, because in my experience, that very rarely happens. I feel like, though, along the Greenway, there is a ton of actually really separated lanes in many places, but I very rarely see anyone using those separated lanes that are actually separated by the grass and go closer to the road. And so there's something uninviting about those that makes people not want to use them. My guess is that they're meant for pedestrians, but pedestrians don't want to use them because it seems like they kind of wind back and forth and aren't very direct. I've also heard people complain that they're too sunny, and people like to use the straight lanes under the tracks because they're shaded. But maybe if there's something that we can do to encourage one type of user to use those lanes by the road, and they're still up on the curb, but the ones that are further out, and then a different type of user to use the ones under the BART tracks. I don't know which one would be fast and which one would be slow, but somehow taking advantage of those separated lanes that are already there, I think would be a really great benefit. Much to the last about the last commenter's idea that putting the actual speed people are going on a flashing light might not be the best idea. I agree with that, because I know that my 12-year-old, if he had a sign showing how fast he was going, that would be a challenge for him to try and go as fast as possible and get a high number. So maybe not the best idea. I like that idea of flashing too fast instead of the actual speed, if you go that route. But I would heavily recommend trying to take advantage of those separated lanes somehow and encouraging people to use that. Thank you very much. I think this is a great topic to tackle.
Amy Schulman, go ahead.
Hi again.
Swolens.
Hi again. I walk and ride on the Greenway pretty much every day. So to go back in time, when some of you people weren't even in Albany, when the Greenway was being retrofit back in 2012, Albany Strollers and Rollers realized that they had the opportunity to have it widened in separate lane stripes, which it was not. So we created petitions and we stood on the Greenway and we talked to people and they signed it. Everyone said, oh yeah, of course we want separate space. We got hundreds of signatures, so voila, it became a reality. And it's a great safety enhancement, but in 12 years, more and more people are riding bikes and scooters than then. Most of the markings have been rubbed out because people are riding and walking on them, so it's not clear where users should be. And the DG paths on both sides for pedestrians and runners have become weeded and degraded, so they've lost a lot of their utility. The staff report says that recent research suggests that speeding micromobility is more of a perception than reality. So the solution is to ensure that all users have their own comfortable and safe space. So you can do that through various improvements. Re-stencil the bike and ped icons onto the lanes because you can't see them anymore. Use larger icons. Add scooter stencils to those bike lanes. I've seen that in Oakland. Maintain the DG paths, weed them so the entire space is usable. I sent you a picture and you see that the DG path is about half of what it was designed to be, the actual usable width. Widen the DG paths to accommodate 2 pedestrians side by side so 2 people can walk and talk together. Maybe try to use a material that may not get as rutted by rains because everything gets pooled up when it rains, and have Public Works commit to maintaining those paths regularly. Fix the giant bump in the northbound lane south of Portland that forces northbound cyclists into the oncoming lane, which then forces southbound cyclists into the pedestrian path. It was shaved down a few years ago, but it's reappeared, so it seems like we got to get to literally the root of the product, and if there were a giant lump in the middle of the street, it wouldn't be tolerated, so this shouldn't be tolerated either. And extend those lanes and markings north from Dartmouth to Santa Fe, most of which is in Albany, and it should have had this treatment in the first place. So my 73-year-old boyfriend rides an e-bike. He doesn't like riding a Masonic. He prefers the Greenway. The families with kids on their bikes, same thing. They prefer the Greenway. And everybody in between does too. So you can just make these simple improvements, make it wider, make it a safer space for all, and have this dedicated active transportation corridor that we already have be more comfortable and useful for everybody, encourage our sustainable transportation in Albany. Thank you.
No additional public comments.
Now it's time for staff comments. Commissioner comments.
Can we go back to the things that you want us to talk about, just for
Questions?
reference? Yeah, the questions. So one, I want to address the problem, and in my mind, one of the problems is not actual speed of people's movements, but the relative speed of the different users. And I think part of that goes to the different uses of particularly the Ohlone Greenway. So we have people who are commuting and using it as kind of a thoroughfare to get from, one place to another. And then we also have people who are using it recreationally. And so I think that rather than the issue being the actual speed of movement, it's differences in relative speed of different user types. Like when I'm biking to commute to Berkeley, I'm moving at a faster pace than if I'm biking to go run errands on Solano or just go down to the library. And so I think that is more of the issue than the actual speed. I have more things to say, but they're unrelated to that, so I'll let other people speak.
Great.
Great. First off, thank you, great presentation, really good public comments. For me, I think that I agree with what was just said. Part of the problem is user comfort. The perception does matter. We acknowledge that the extremes do occur. The data was great that it's it's not really that much different, and that's fine, but you get one person zooming past you, and you're like, oh my God, it's pervasive. So the feeling is there. We just need to be ready to acknowledge that. I think the designated lanes on the Greenway are great. The suggestion to refresh and enhance totally makes sense. I like the reminder signs, a lot of the examples we were shown to help clearly set the expectations. I'm tempted to say including posting speed limits, but to Harry's point, sometimes that gets viewed as a challenge. Alternatively, I think it would be really more encouraging of the behavior we want to post a speed range. The walking lane is 0 to 5 miles an hour. The bike lanes are 5 to 15. So now I'm going 7 miles an hour, I'm in the right range. I'm going 14, I'm in the right range. 17 and 18 isn't getting you there. It's like, oh, I'm out of the range, rather than, oh, I'm doing better than 15. We want to change that perception, because I totally get it. So the posting ranges rather than a limit will help to set the expectation of what behavior we want. Similarly, on the speed feedback signs, the radar signs, too fast was really funny. I wouldn't put that on there. For any high school kid, that's a challenge. I wanted to tell me I'm too fast. That's great. Tell them to slow down. Tell what behavior you want. Or if you're in the right range, instead of posting the number, some positive comment, good speed. Just make it qualitative and positive, not something that leads to sort of a sense of challenge. Again, I'm hearing really great stuff, so I'm synthesizing that and kind of reflecting on it. Short term, I think maintenance and some of the new signs, a little bit of creative stuff out there would be great. Long term, yeah, I agree. I'd love to have wider paths whenever we can do it, but that's going to take a while, but we should try to get there. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree with the past two commissioners, and I think that it is a behavior issue that we're trying to address. I think that my preference would be to prioritize infrastructure-based strategies and the community engagement. It's been discussed already, but I'll echo that it's all about the comfortability, and I think people will choose the most comfortable option to them. Right now we're fitting a lot of different uses onto one path, and yeah, people are just going to do what they're most comfortable with. So choosing infrastructure strategies, traffic calming measures that will separate people naturally. It'll be very self-selecting. People will want to choose the path that works for them. I really liked the public comment suggesting to use the existing separation between that we have on the sidewalk next to the road and the greenway. I might even suggest that existing sidewalk by the roadway could be a raised cycle track. That is a more direct route that is good for commuting speeds, and it would pull those users away from the walking paths. I would like to point out another good example is the Cross Alameda Trail. They have a lot more land in this section, so perhaps that could be a different constraint for us, but that separates, for a section of that trail, it separates cyclists and pedestrians, and the cycle path is pretty straightforward, and while the pedestrian path is slightly meandering, but the landscaping also does a lot to inform the intended use of those paths, and I think that a lot of this is visual communication of what the intended use is through those infrastructure changes. And also going into the community engagement, I think ultimately we want everyone to feel comfortable. When you see families and kids using the path, you think of it as being part of your community, and you want to respect everyone's use of the path. So yeah, I think that's something in the short term is through signs or through engagement events to just build more community around it, to inform folks that the Greenway is being used by multiple users. And then ultimately, long term, it would be great for us to consider when we're thinking about the active transportation development or the ATP development is, could we even push these different uses, like not trying to squeeze them onto the Greenway itself, but just on neighboring streets that aren't too far away. It's not too far away just to go up or down one block if we designate that as being like the fast commuting thoroughfare. So I don't know, maybe that's some long-term thoughts.
Question, your Cross Alameda Trail, is that City of Alameda or County of Alameda?
The city on the island.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a couple comments about sort of the primary issue and the scale and severity. For me personally, I haven't experienced a lot of e-bikes where the pedaling is required, sort of reducing the comfort of the trails. For me, it's been electric unicycles in motorcycle helmets. You guys have experienced that. Those people who use that on the Albany Greenway are some of the biggest. They feel like a threat when they come behind you at 30 miles an hour. So those, and also sort of electric motorcycle where you see them not pedaling, you see them not really doing anything other than accelerating. And I think the reason why, though that's way more scary than if a bicyclist was going the same speed, is you assume the bicyclist has more control, and the bicyclist takes longer to accelerate, so in between streets they may need to slow down and then re-accelerate, so they won't get to the speed that an electric vehicle such as an electric unicycle could get to in that same time. And that's one of the biggest issues that I've experienced on the trail. Another comment I wanted to make was about, I definitely agreed with Carrie about the challenge on the speed signs. Those people on those electric unicycles would take that as more of a challenge to go even faster. But I also wanted to bring up a point about the speed bumps or the rumble zones. If we have a lot of skateboarders here in Albany, and those small bumps, although they might not be consequential for a bicyclist or a runner, when you have such small wheels and without suspension, it can be, you have to stop, get off, walk over the bumps, and start again. So although that wasn't really in discussion all that much, I do want to kind of dissuade from that. And if they're going fast enough and they don't see it at night, they can be thrown off, of course.
Judy, do you have any comments about your experience as a pedestrian?
Yeah, I primarily am a pedestrian, although I have a bike and I do ride it. And there's really not too much that hasn't been said already. I would like to disagree a little bit with the notion that the curbside sidewalk, which is horribly disrupted right now, it's really almost impassable to most pedestrians, doesn't really function at all as a sidewalk and needs quite a bit of repair, but I understand there are some challenges to getting that done. It would be nice if it was done, and I would rather see it as a sidewalk than a raised bike rail. The Masonic is a very suitable road and maybe needs some enhancements to make it a more high-speed, medium comfort bike lane that would take people off of the Greenway who are really wanting to commute. But to take away a pedestrian sidewalk and turn it into a bike lane when there's a bike street and a bike shared pathway just wouldn't make sense to me. So from a pedestrian point of view, I think enhancing the crushed granite is excellent. Amy's idea of widening it is a really good idea. And I think really the key element to all of what we're talking about is behavior. None of this happens without the people who are using these conveyances. So I think education is where I would like to see us really focus some energy and maybe have a couple of bike to work days where we're talking about how to be polite, how to be friendly, how to respect the other people who are using the trails. that would be an important focus, I think. That's it.
I already addressed number 1, so I'm going to go to my thoughts on number 3 and 4. And I agree with a lot of the things that have been said here. A couple just specifics are, I agree that I don't like the rumble strips or the textured pavement because I often am riding a bike with kids on the back or kids in the front. And so there's not great suspension on those like cargo bikes, and kids can really feel the bumps. So I also would vote against those, similar to the idea of the skateboards. I think something that I've seen in Emeryville that I really like is they have a stencil that has a parent with a kid in like a kid seat rather than the traditional bike person. And I think that provides a visual reminder to people that like this is a shared space. There's people who are, riding with their kids or who are moving through this like more recreationally rather than this being specifically a commuter lane. So I would encourage us to consider using alternative stencils for the bike path rather than just the traditional one. I don't know if others have seen that in Emeryville, but I really like those. And then I agree with that we really need to widen the pedestrian portion of the Albany Greenway. Oftentimes people are trying to walk as a group, and the current space is too narrow, and so then they're kind of forced to walk into the bike section. And so I agree with that. I know that's more of a longer term one. And similarly, I agree with what everybody else has been saying about the speed detection signs. I feel like those are too much of an incentive to go extra fast. Thank you.
Okay, I just have a few comments. I'm going to try to tie them into this issue more. One thing I think we do need to consider is rain and darkness. How effective some of these things may be in those situations is different. When I commuted back and forth to UC Berkeley in the winter, at night I'd always be commuting in the dark, and I pretty much had memorized where every pothole was because you just never know. You can't see them. For example, rumble strips, certain times that elastomeric paint, when it gets wet, it's super slippery. And then it's like riding across wet railroad tracks. The bike can really flip out your front wheel can flip really easily. So that's my take on number 3. Number 2, in my experience, I don't see the scale of severity that I see when I ride bikes in Marin County, where kids have more money and there's a lot more e-bikes, but that means I think it's coming this way. So the primary issue we're trying to address is keeping people out of the emergency room. That's what I think. And long term is what I think we're seeing, and I've probably said this before, we're seeing now a whole continuum of different ways to move, especially with lithium-powered vehicles from, used to be you walked, you rode a bike, or you drove in your car. Now that space in between is filling in. And kind of the problem we have long-term is we also have kind of a menu of different routes and routes of different characteristics. And it's going to be a matter of matching these new ways of transportation to the different kind of routes we can create. And that's going to be a big challenge in the long term. But it's going to, because, adding some of these different features for different types of micromobility will take some time and maybe some asphalt. So that's it. Any other comments? Ken? Oops, I'm sorry. You can hit me,
Do we have or can we access some kind of data on crashes on Albany Greenway and on these shared spaces to kind of see what is actually the issue here?
We can review our injury collision data easily, and we have, with the existing conditions of analysis for the active transportation plan, looked at broader collision data over the last 10 years, so we can take a look at that for specific to Greenway collisions. I don't remember any off the top of my head other than at intersections, but we should be able to take a look at that.
Ken?
Thanks. Yeah, a lot of good discussion, and I think there's a general agreement again on behavior, which is great. Another reason for this discussion was that we're creating more paths. We're possibly looking at creating more in the ATP plans. So it's good to have an idea of what speed we're intending the pathway to be and how to achieve that. Some comments were made about maintenance and repainting, which I support. The gravel can now be maintained with the sidewalk tax funds, so I'm hoping that that gets pulled into the regular plans for maintenance. Could take a while to do the entire length of the Greenway initially, but hopefully that'll be on more of a regular basis. And there were a lot of comments about signage and more of an appropriate and light tone, and there were some great ideas about that. You know, taking off from where we are with the turkey signs down on the Cotternesis Creek Trail, that was actually done entirely, I believe, by the Public Works Department. So thank you, Public Works Department. That was a great surprise. But in terms of what kind of signage, that kind of right of way, the slow down, good speed, reactive sign, and some indication of an expectation that faster users would consider using Masonic. Because it's not explicit now. There are sharrows on the road, but when you're on the Greenway, it looks really good. So let's try to get around that. I mean, I also want to say that there is a pinch point or a demand zone between Brighton and Fairmount that gets a lot of traffic, especially at commute times. There are other places that get busy, especially with middle school and high school pedestrians and rollers of all kinds. But between Brighton and Fairmount, the markings change from what's in most of Albany. The distance is pretty long. And there isn't a parallel route. Something I want to consider in the ATP is does it make sense to direct people who want to go faster around onto what's called Barron's, and in Albany it's called
Spokane.
Spokane, thank you. But that's something I've been playing around with when I'm on my e-bike. When it's commute time, I don't want to blast through on the Greenway, and I don't want to go through the plaza. That's a headache. And I've had mixed results. It's pretty easy to get along Spokane and not harass the people who live there. And get through to Barron's, and that's reasonable. It's a little more challenging to get up and down Fairmount between there and the BART station, and to know when to turn because the street signs are all old and you can't read them anymore. But something to consider later. Thank you.
I second the appreciation for the turkey sign.
Just in case there's some confusion, Barron's is the street that is in El Cerrito, and Spokane's the one in Albany, and it used to go through. I won't tell you the bad politics and stuff why that was changed, but now they block the street off, but there's still a sidewalk that goes through. And actually, when I come back from BART at night, that's the way I go on foot, because I don't want to walk under the BART tracks.
There's a sidewalk and wood chips in the middle of the circle there,
Yeah,
so it's bikeable.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Going once, going twice? Yes,
I just want to finally reemphasize Judy's point about education. I think that's a long-term solution that could work, and if we really put some resources into that, it's an effective solution that doesn't damage the experience for anyone else on the paths.
Yeah. And that would require some interaction with the school district eventually, but that, you know, that can happen.
I'm here, so.
Oh, that's right. Well, but I was thinking more K through 6, but.
Are you making assumptions about the age of the people who are exhibiting behavior? Albany is a crossroads, so education would have to address people coming to Albany from elsewhere as well.
That's true, but we have some control over our local school district, but we don't have any control over El Cerrito School District.
I wouldn't use the word control, but I understand what you're saying.
I used to be on the school board too, so I know.
Most of us aren't on the school board. We have no control.
No guidance.
I definitely support education, but I think that was a good point about not being able to like maybe completely reach the people that are passing through. All the more reason to have good visual cues and visual communication on the path itself, so that you're not even thinking, you know, you're just guided by it naturally making sense to go this way or that way. So.
Yeah, I really liked your idea of having the speed ranges rather than speed limits, and then you could even say like greater than 15 miles per hour, use Masonic, something like that.
Yeah, I want to see that electronic sign. Get off the path.
We could have a lot of fun with one of those.
Congratulations.
All right, so I think that's good enough for item 6.3. So now we're on to 6.4, appreciation for past commissioners.
Don't have a presentation on this item. We do have draft resolutions of appreciation for each of the 4 commissioners that are no longer on. Happy to pull those up and read through them if you'd like, or for you to peruse, but
Do we have
as you will. There should be one set we could pass around.
Well, would one of us like to read? I'm a little hoarse myself, but if someone would like to read these out loud, you're more than welcome, Ken.
I'd be happy to.
You had that look on your face.
I have trained in voiceover. All right, let's,
Go to the
I'll
podium.
keep it moving. Sorry?
You can go to that podium.
If that's your desire.
This is in there.
But no matter how much I mangle this, I do have a lot of appreciation for my former co-commissioners. So I'm going to read the heading once. The City of Albany Transportation Commission Resolution, and they're all slightly different, number XXX, Resolution of Appreciation to Evan Virgil McClanahan for his service on the Transportation Commission. Whereas Evan was appointed to the Transportation Commission in June 2023, and whereas Evan dutifully served as a member of the commission for 1.5 years, chairing the commission in 2004, and advanced revisions to city parking policies, advocating for improvements to the city's bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, and worked to improve the walking and cycling experience of Albany Public School students traveling to and from school. And Evan guided the commission through challenging and complex discussions as it advanced major projects, including the Keynes-Adams Bikeway pilot project, the Santa Fe Avenue traffic calming project, and phase 2 of the Marin Avenue pavement and curve rehabilitation project. And Evan served on and provided essential input to the Active Transportation Plan Consultant Selection Committee, which I observed myself. Now therefore be it resolved that the Transportation Commission does express its appreciation to Evan for his service to the City of Albany and wishes him the best in future endeavors. Skipping the header, Harry Chomsky was appointed to the Transportation Commission in January 2014 and reappointed in January 2023. Chomsky dutifully served as a member of the commission for a total of 7 years, providing valuable input on the plans and designs for a wide variety of transportation improvements throughout the city. As a member of the commission, Chomsky advocated for improvements to the city's bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, advanced updated parking policies, and recognized the critical need for policies and programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in and around Albany. Chomsky helped to advance major projects, including the Ames Bikeway pilot project, say that 7 times fast, the Jackson Street Bikeway, Phase 2 of the Marin Avenue pavement and curb rehabilitation project, and the citywide streetlight evaluation. Chomsky is recognized for his careful preparation for each meeting and thoughtful consideration of every public comment made before, during, and sometimes after the commission meeting. Therefore, be it resolved that the Transportation Commission does express its appreciation to Harry Chomsky for his service to the City of Albany and wishes him the best in future endeavors. Whereas Nelson Peng was appointed to the Transportation Commission in April 2022 and dutifully served as a member of the commission for almost 3 years, providing valuable input on the plans and designs for a wide variety of transportation improvements throughout the city. And Peng advanced the design of a variety of bicycle and pedestrian projects and contributed to the development of the city parklet program and local road safety plan. Through his work on the commission, Peng advanced major projects, including the Keynes-Adam Bikeway pilot project, the Jackson Street Bikeway, and the citywide streetlight evaluation. Peng is recognized for his keen eye and thoughtful consideration of a visually appealing urban design aesthetic for the projects that he reviewed as commissioner. So, therefore, be it resolved that the Transportation Commission does express its appreciation to Nelson Peng for his service to the City of Albany and wishes him the best in future endeavors. Leo von Neuden was appointed to the Transportation Commission in June 2023, and Leo served as a member of the commission for 1.5 years, providing valuable input to the planning and design of a wide variety of transportation improvements throughout the city. Leo played a key role in advancing the Jackson Street Bikeway, the Keynes-Adam Bikeway pilot project, and citywide street lighting evaluation through the commission. Leo actively represented the walking and cycling needs of Albany students on the commission. Now, therefore be it resolved that the Transportation Commission does express its appreciation to Leo von Neuden for his service to the City of Albany and wishes him the best in future endeavors. Thank you to staff for providing those specific notes and resolutions.
All I got to say is, I want that person to write my resume. Thank you, Ken.
I move that we resolve the 4 resolutions. Is that appropriate? Or is there another way? I move that we, so we usually recommend, right?
You can adopt these
So,
as
yes, I
resolutions
move that we
of the
adopt
commission.
the 4 resolutions as they're printed, not as just read. I'll pass this back.
I will second that. Well
May
done.
we have a roll call?
Commissioner Baldwin,
Aye.
Commissioner Hiley,
Aye.
Commissioner Kerr,
Aye, and thank you to all of them.
Commissioner Zavendal,
Aye.
Commissioner McCroskey,
A hearty yes.
Commissioner Zuba,
Aye.
and Chair Barnes.
Yes.
Motion carries. All right, next item on your agenda is selection of chair and vice chair for the calendar year 2025.
Or someone needs to make a motion, is that correct?
That's correct. So you would open it up for nominations for chair first.
Well, you know, I'll nominate myself, which I think is just because there are many people, it's become obvious in the last few hours, that have very many good ideas, probably more so than me. And there's something to be said for having the person who tries to organize the meetings not to be bubbling over with good ideas, because it's a different kind of way of thinking and task. When I was on the council, I never wanted to be the mayor because I didn't want to run stuff. I just wanted to say what I wanted to say. This is a little different. I think I'm overwhelmed by people who have more ideas than me, so I'm happy to be the chair if you all are satisfied by that.
Well, in having nominated you to chair this meeting, that was exactly my thinking, was that, not that you didn't have a lot of good ideas, let me correct that. But Michael, I think you have the administrative experience from your time on city council to really keep us on track and get us out of here before 10:30 or 10 o'clock even. One of the things that's important to me is to have an effective meeting. I've served on a number of commissions, and I know that if the chair loses control of the conversation, the meeting falls apart. So I think you have that set of skills, and you don't need a second, but you got one.
So, are we discussing, can we make counter?
Yeah, you can nominate yourself or anyone also.
I don't intend to nominate myself at this time. In particular because I live very close to Solano Avenue, and I think the logistics of recusing myself from parts of the discussion could be cumbersome for this body in the coming year. So I really enjoy being chair, but not this time. With no shade intended to Michael, I'm interested in recommending Fareed for chair. I've served with him on this commission for many years, and he served on the commission before I was on it, before he took a break to be on city council. I find his calm, cool, collected way of behaving in meetings to be very constructive, and he can also synthesize ideas and lead us towards resolutions at key moments, I've found, and I value that.
Thank you, Ken. I'd be happy to do it. I traditionally defer to give other people a chance. I think Michael and I are in a similar position in that regard, so I don't mind in this case. Happy to do it if that's what people would like. Might be a good way to make fewer comments and save them until the end, but very, very comfortable with that if that's what people would like. Thank you.
Now, there's a voting procedure here. You could.
Yeah, so we typically take it like we do with motions for our advisory bodies. So we typically would ask if there are any other nominations and then do it in as a counter motion, so in reverse order back. So it would be a vote, in this case, on the second nomination of Commissioner Javendel, up or down first, and then if not accepted, then it would be a vote for Chair Barton's up or down.
Okay, so everyone, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, correct?
And it would go, yeah, for majority vote. If the first one for Commissioner Javendel was a majority, then he would be the chair, and if he didn't get the majority, then it would be considered for Chair Barnes.
Okay, so let's vote for, Ken, question?
Yeah, do I need to get a second, or is Fareed's acceptance of the nomination considered a second?
Nominations don't require a second, so both would be considered eligible for voting.
Can we abstain if we have no real information?
Yeah, you can choose to abstain.
All right, so let's call the question. This is an up or down vote. Should Fareed Javendel be the new chair of the Transportation Commission?
Commissioner Baldwin.
I abstain.
Commissioner Hiley.
Aye.
Commissioner Kerr.
No.
Commissioner Javendel.
Aye.
Commissioner McCroskey.
Aye.
Commissioner Zuba.
Aye.
Chair Barnes.
Is it 3 already?
It is 4, so it's already majority.
I'm sorry.
It's already the majority.
Okay, then yes, what the heck?
Okay, motion carries.
And I'd be, thank you, be happy to nominate Michael as vice chair.
Oh, yeah.
Is there someone else who'd like that role?
Sounds like
That's a yes.
Barnes is accepting. Any other nominations for vice chair? Not seeing any. We'll do the roll call. Commissioner Baldwin.
Aye.
Commissioner, I guess now Commissioner Barnes.
Aye.
Commissioner Hiley.
Aye.
Commissioner Kerr.
Yes.
Commissioner McCroskey.
Yes.
Commissioner Zuba.
Aye.
And Chair Jopenda.
Aye.
Motion carries. Congratulations to you both.
No, we're out of here by 9:30.
Well done. If you go past her, fall asleep.
I don't want that. Okay, any announcements?
We have 3 hours of announcements. Yeah, we have a few announcements. The first is just a little bit of an update on grants. We had a couple of grants that we heard back from that we did not receive. The one was the Safe Routes to Transit and Bay Trail grant from MTC. There were 51 applications submitted and 7 awarded. I think we have gone over this previously, but the active transportation program, we did not receive that grant as well. The MTC just gave their recommendations for the grant, and because we applied to a quick build version of the Keynes Adam project, it was not eligible for the MTC version, but that was also a 3% of applications that were submitted were awarded grants for that because the legislature reduced the amount of funding for that program this year. And we are still waiting to hear back on 3 grants. One is the MTC Climate Implementation Grant for the Pierce-Cleveland connection project. We're expecting to hear this spring on that. The Alameda CTC CIP for the Pierce-Cleveland project, again, that we expect to hear this spring, and then the 2025 Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant for a Cerrito Creek Crossing alternatives analysis. We expect to hear back about that this summer. Second announcement is the citywide red curb daylighting project. The Public Works Department completed the citywide daylighting red curb project at all approaches to all intersections throughout the city, with the exception of Solano in the past couple of weeks. This reflects state law AB 413 and improves visibility at intersections for pedestrians, cyclists, and moving vehicles. And the departure side of the red curb installation per the city policy will continue to be implemented with future street maintenance projects. We alluded to this earlier, but we received some council direction on Solano Avenue, and we'll be looking at parking and cost scenarios in the next couple months to bring back to council. And we discussed that at the February 18th council meeting, and those are the announcements.
Thank you. Before we proceed to future agenda items, can I get a motion to extend to 9:40?
I move we extend the meeting to 9:40, and I actually wanted to make an announcement.
Oh, please do.
Well, let me extend the meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Please continue.
Judy and I actually recently had some interaction with the Saha development, and the thing I wanted to bring back here, I got a tour of their bike rooms. It's a lovely facility, and I appreciate that it's there and everything. But despite having, was it 6,000 applications for 60 spots? Yeah. Despite being hugely oversubscribed, a number of people dropped out of the process because of the location. And the lack of transit was an oft-cited reason. So I just wanted to bring that feedback back to this commission. Not that we shouldn't have constructed or helped construct that. It's a transit desert. There are Transbay buses that run on Pierce Street. You're not able to take those for local transportation. They don't run all day.
Sorry, where is that?
The Saha development is at the corner of Washington and Pierce Street.
Got it.
And is in the area where we're working on putting a connection between the Buchanan pathway and Pierce Street.
It's the one you see from the freeway now, that sort of mauve-colored building.
Facing Cleveland. Okay. All right. Future agenda items, unless there's any other announcements. And you had one?
Right, and I wrote myself a note, just a sec. I would like to have us return to look at the implemented curb cuts and sidewalk design around San Pablo and Castro, with an eye to looking to enhancing the curb ramp guidelines, or iterating the curb ramp guidelines.
That sounds good. And I will add to that, if possible, we'd like staff to come back with recommendations for reflective, raised, or other elements to improve the visibility with raised curbs in the pedestrian path of travel.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to send you that language later, Justin, so you don't have to write it all down now.
And I would like to add one thing in regard to previous comments by Brian about flooding on San Pablo Avenue. It's not clear to me if that's a storm drain design problem or if it's a sewer problem. And I know Public Works can make that determination, but I just wanted to check and make sure that that's been, conceived of and dealt with.
There's no storm drain under segments of San Pablo Avenue. It is surface flow. It's a Caltrans facility. We are embarking on a watershed management planning effort that should wrap up next year, and will be when we would be looking at what improvements to our storm water management we might do and what funding scenarios we would be looking at to implement those.
The bowling alley project is going to be redesigned as around a central drain. That'll help.
Not what it would take.
And you can have bowling balls spinning around it like the Exploratorium.
Any future agenda items that staff would like to highlight? If not, we can wait. I want to put you on the spot.
We do have the street tree management plan will be likely be coming back to the Parks Rec and Open Space, I think in April, so we'll see timing wise, but likely bring an update to the commission as well on that before it goes to council. The capital improvement planning should be kicking off in the next couple months, should have a discussion come to the commission as well. Those are the items I think on the horizon that
Very good. Item 9, our next meeting is Thursday, March 27th, 2025 at 7 p.m. And item 10, we are adjourned. Thank you all.